Sotah Daf Mem Daled continues working through our last Mishnah, which had been discussing what the Shoitrim say to the army before they go out to war, who needs to go home and should not continue into the war. The beginning of the Daf is discussing halacha about Tumas Meis, which is related because of the people who said it. So we'll begin in the last line of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that a mace, a dead person or grave, fills tumah into the forearms around it. That's a din midrabanan. Rabbanan were afraid that if you allowed a person to go right up to the mace, assuming he was tahar, even though that's the halacha midaraisa, he may accidentally wave his hand over the mace, and that would be tumas oil, and he would be tamei. So in order to prevent that from happening, we said that there is tumah for 4 amas around him on all sides. So you could prove this from a brisa. The brisa says that if you have a mace within the walls of a crypt, that limits the tumah. The clear implication is that the mace himself, the tumah is not limited. So let's see the brisa. The Gemara is going to analyze it because there is something confusing there. So the brisa says that a cave that has graves in it. So the way the burials happen in the days of Chazal was that they would dig a cave underground, and the cave would be about 6 amas by 6 amas in a circle, and they would dig little holes in the walls. The holes would be about the size of a coffin, and the bodies would be put into those holes in the walls. And that way they were all kavur b'adama. They all had the burial in the ground, but you could go into the cave. Now, there were 2 types of these caves. Some were accessed by a ramp or a staircase that led from underground up to the surface, and it came out of the side of the cave. And some just had a hole in the top, and you would drop down into it, and you would climb out by pushing yourself up from the sides of the walls. Now, so what is the halacha of this crypt, of this cave? So the tumah is contained within the walls, and therefore you could go right up to it, and you don't have to worry that you're going to accidentally become tamei, because you see the wall, you see the edge of the crypt, you know how far you're allowed to go. So even though you're right next to a mace, potentially there's no problem of the tumah extending past it because you have a clear demarcation, you have a wall. Now, there is a minimum size, though. It has to be large enough in order for it to qualify as a separate entity. So how large is a separate entity? So Beis Shammai says it has to be 4 amas. Less than 4 amas is not a separate entity. Beis Hillel says it depends how you leave it. If you leave it by going up through the top, then it's only 4 tefachim. 4 tefachim is enough to be a separate entity. If you leave it by walking out through stairs to the side, then you need 4 amas to be a separate entity. So that's not logical. Leaving it from the side, you're less likely to accidentally become a tamei on your way out. You're going away from it. So there, you should have less of a problem. If you want to make anything if you want to make less of a requirement for distancing oneself, there should be 4 tefachim, not the other way around. And if you're climbing out of the top, so there you have a serious concern. You may potentially be over one of the dead. Someone says, you're right, switch it. If it's leaving by steps, then it's 4 amos, then it's 4 tefachim, and if it's leaving by up through the top, then it's 4 amas. But either way, we see from here that it's only if you have a wall that contains the tumah, makes a clear demarcation, do we say that the tumah is not considered to have spread midrabanan. But if it is just a mace alone, then you don't say that. We're now refers to the next part of the Mishnah where we said that the Shaiter says anybody who was ma'aris, who got engaged to marry, did kiddushin with a lady and did not get a chance to complete it, so he should go home. So more quotes on the brisa, which explains the halachas and the source. The brisa says it includes one who is ma'aris, who gets engaged to a besula or an almana, or even someone who's just waiting for a shomeres yavam. She has a woman following him to Yibam. Even if he had 5 brothers and one of them was killed in the war, and his wife now falls to Yibam because he didn't have children, those other 4 brothers all go home from the war because they have a shomeres yavam who's waiting for them. Now, the Torah in this phrasing here says, Asher eras isha v'loy lekacha, did not take her. So why does it say lekacha, extra hair, or should have just said loy lakach? Why does it have to say lekacha? That's to limit it. That's only, lekacha is a contraction of lakach isa, meaning that it was only that he didn't take her, but there's someone else who, even though he didn't take, it would not be a p'tor from the war. So who's that? So the Gemara says this is to exclude an almana to a kohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza to a kohen hedit, mamzeres or nesina. Nesina is one of the gevonim who were sent in the times of Yeshua. And nesina to Yisrael, that's also a forbidden marriage, or bas Yisrael to a mamzer and a nisin. So all these, the reason why they're not exemptions, because he can't say he should go home to her, because it's also for him to go home to her, because the marriage is forbidden. So Gemara says this would seem to be indication that this brisa is not going like Rabbi Saglili. Rabbi Saglili says that somebody has a ptur of being afraid if he has an avera. Fear means that he did an avera and he's afraid that the avera is going to cause him to fail in the war. So if that's true, so then why are we saying that these people can't go home because of their marriage? They could go home anyway, because since the marriage is an isser, they did an avera, so they go home because the avera causes them fear. So where it says no, okay, it didn't fit with the Rebbe Saglili, it could be like the opinion of Rabbah, because Rabbah says all these marriages, the marriage itself is not the isser. The isser is the first bia. So it could be that they are married, but there is no bia. As a matter of fact, the most logical that there's married and there's no bia, because we said that they only did erisin, and therefore the pasuk is saying that there is no avera to send them home, and this type of marriage doesn't send them home either because it's a forbidden marriage. Rabbi's opinion is that there's no isser until the bia, because the Torah says the reason not to marry this is because shelo yichal zarek. It's going to create a state of chilul on the children. If he's not going to do a bia, there is no state of chilul. There is no children. So it's only once the bia happens that the isser happens. The Gemara now quotes another brisa, which takes us into a related agadata. The brisa says the words of the shaiter here are whoever built a house, or planted a vineyard, or was engaged to a woman. So you see, this is the order that it's supposed to be. This is what the derech eretz is. He should first build himself a house, plant a vineyard, so he has a place to live and answer parnasa, and only then should he get married. He should have those things prepared first. And the Gemara quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, which this one of the explanations of the pasuk will be this order, and then the Gemara will give a number of other explanations of this pasuk itself. The pasuk says, "Hachem b'chutz malachtecha," prepare outside your work. The atida basade loch, and atida, Rashi means to stand up. You should set things up in your field. Achar v'nisa v'secha, afterwards build your house. So what does this mean? So Gemara's first pshat is that hachem chos malachtecha, set up your work, is to build yourself a house. Atida basade means you should plant yourself a vineyard. V'nisa v'secha means you should get married. Next pshat, hachem chaz malachta, is to learn psukim. V'atida is to learn mishnah, that is the halacha. And when he says beisacha, is to learn the gemara, the logic and the reasons behind it. Third pshat, hachem chaz malachta refers to mikra and mishnah. Atida basada means gemara. When he says beisacha, that has to wait until later. That's doing mitzvahs and maisim tovim, good deeds. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Yosef Glili, says hachem chaz malachta includes mikra, mishnah, and gemara. Etida basada, that's the maisim tovim. When he says beisacha is to say drashos, to start expounding on the words of the Torah itself, and to receive schar. The Gemara continues discussing the Mishnah. The Mishnah said there's a category of people who don't go back from war. They have to go to fight. The example of that was someone who built a house, just he took it apart and put it back together and didn't add anything. So the Gemara adds one line. The Gemara says if he added even one row of bricks, it's considered a new house, and that would be reason for him to go home. Now, Rabbi Eliezer said if somebody builds a house out of Levanim in the Sharon, he doesn't go home because of that. The Gemara quotes the Brisa and says the reason is because those houses don't last very long. They have to be rebuilt twice in 7 years. Now, the Mishnah continues, and it had a list of people who don't even have to go out to the border and don't have to join the team that provides food, water, supplies, and fixes the roads. So all these people we've said so far, there are three groups. There are those who have to go fight. There are those who don't have to go fight because they had some of these things that they qualified for, and therefore they go back from fighting. They don't cross the border, but they do have to fix the roads and provide the supply chain. Then there are people who stay home. They don't go even to the border, and they don't do any work at all. Amongst those, you have someone who married a woman, not just that he got engaged, but he married her, and he's still within the first year. So the Gemara analyzes the pasuk that says that, it calls her an isha chadasha, a new woman. So what does this mean? So the Gemara says chadasha means that she is a psula, but isha clearly includes even if she's not a psula, even if she's just a woman, even if she's not one who's new. So what do you mean? So an almana or a gusha from someone else are included. If he marries a woman who's new to him, even though she was married before, she's not a psula, it's still a reason to stay home. However, if he's remarrying his ex-wife, that's not considered a isha chadasha, and therefore that does not qualify him to stay home. Now, what exactly does he do? So, quotes a brisa. He doesn't go out to war, so you would think he doesn't go out to war, but he does have to serve the water. He does have to create he has to work in the supply chain of bringing water and food and fixing the roads. And therefore, it says v'lo yaver olav l'chol davar. He doesn't go for anything. He stays home completely. Now, you might think that that applies even to someone who built a house and he did not mechanech it yet, or he planted a vineyard and he did not redeem the netter, right? He's in the same category. Or someone who married a woman and who was engaged to a woman and didn't marry her yet. Those are all do not have the sacha. They do have to go fix the roads. They do have to go make the supply chain. You would think it applies to them also. So we know that it does not, because it says olav. You don't make it go olav, layav, or olav only for that, and not for other things. There are others who do have to go do the supply chain. Now the Gemara asks, if it says layavar, why does it have to say lo yetzi batzava? It says layavar, they don't do anything, so why does it have to say that they don't go out to the war, obviously? So Gemara says that's just to add another lav. Layavar is one, lo yetzi batzava is the second one. So this concludes the Gemara's comment on the last Mishnah. Now we begin the next Mishnah, which discusses the next thing that the shotrim, that the officers, said to the people as they approached the war. So the pasuk says, "V'yasvu hashotrim," and the officers continue. They added to speak to the nation. And they said, "Who's the one who is afraid and soft of heart? So he should go and return to his house, and should not melt the heart of his brothers like his own heart." So first, the Mishnah discusses what type of fear are we referring to here. Rabbi Akiva says we're talking about simple fear. He's afraid of the war. He's afraid of the closeness of the war. He can't stand to see a drawn sword. Second opinion is Yosef Glili. He says he's afraid because he has an Avera. He did an Avera. He knows he has, and he's afraid that will cause him to fail in the war and get killed. And therefore, that's the reason that the Torah puts all these people together, those who have new house, new wife, new vineyard, and together with the one who did an Avera, so that no one should know why he's leaving. Could be because he has one of those things, and it would not be embarrassed because he has an Avera. Now, Rabbi Yossi says the third thing, which is more explain why it's different than Rabbi Yossi Glili. He says we're talking about we're talking about someone who's in a forbidden marriage. It's almana who's married to a kohen gadol, or kohen gadol that is married to an almana. Grusha v'chalutz to a kohen headed, mamzer and nesina to Yisrael, basel to mamzer and a nesin. They are the people who are afraid and weak-hearted. That's what we're referring to. Now the mission continues, and it says once the officers finish speaking, then you put officers in front of the army and in the back of the army. You put strong people in the front to be able to support those who fall, to be able to stand them up and continue encouraging them and pushing them to fight on. You put people behind them to make sure that nobody runs away, because running away is how you lose a war. So they stand there with arrows. Anybody tries to run away, they can knock out his feet. And the expression the Mishnah uses is the beginning of running is falling. And I'm always going to ask that that's the opposite. The beginning of falling is running. Now, the Mishnah quotes Psukim. It says, Nas Yisrael lifnei Pelishtim. And then later, it says, Pelishtim l'chavim b'Yisrael vayanusu anshe Yisrael. So you have first Nas, then vayanusu, then it says, vayiplu chalalam b'har hagabah. And then they actually fell. Now, what type of war are we referring to when we send all these people home? So there are three types of war. There's Mechamas Rishos, that's optional. Mechamas Mitzvah, that is a mitzvah. And then there's Mechamas Chayva, that is an obligation. I'm going to explain what the difference between the three are. Now, there are two opinions here. According to the first opinion, you send them home from a Mechamas Rishos, but not a Mechamas Mitzvah or Chova. For them, even a Chassan and Chal go straight from the Chuppah. Rabbi Yehuda says you send them home from Mechamas Rishus or Mitzvah, but only from Mechamas Chova do they each need to go. Gemara now begins. The Gemara asks what's the difference between the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara says the difference is if someone is violated in Isser Darbanan. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's only something like Gush V'Chalutza to a Kohen, which is Isser Daraisa. That's what is grounds to go home because he is afraid of that Avera. According to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, even a minor Isser Darbanan. This is the Gemara of a Brisa. If someone spoke between his tefillin shayad, between putting on his tefillin shayad and his tefillin shorosh, that's an avera, and he goes back from fighting the war. So who is he holding like that? Brisa is going like a basically. Says Gemara, who's the author of the following Brisa? It says if he heard the sound of the chariots and he trembled, or if he heard the banging of the shields or the clashing of the swords, and he urinated himself from fear that he should go back. Who holds that way? You would say maybe that's only Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva is the one who said that even if he's just afraid of the war, he needs to go back. So Mar says, no, he basically would also agree to that. Basically, he says you still have the pasuk of Lo Yimaslas Eslavav Echav Kilvavai. He will still cause fear amongst his fellow soldiers, and therefore he would agree that such a person should go back as well. The Gemara now explains the three levels of milchama. We said that there was rishus, mitzvah, and chayva. So the Gemara says there aren't really two opinions as to which ones you have to be chayzer for. Everybody agrees that for what we called rishus and for what we called mitzvah, you don't go back from the war for that. Machlokes is only if there's a type of war which is called a mitzvah, or if it's just all called rishus. So we're talking about the same things. All the things that Rabbi Yehuda called mitzvah and rishus and mitzvah, all those you don't go back from the war for, except that the Rabbanan called them all rishus. At the same time, they all agree you don't go back for any of those. But the Rabbanan called them all rishus, and Rabbi Yehuda called them a mitzvah. And the reason, what they're arguing over is would this count as a mitzvah that you could say that he's patur from doing other mitzvahs? So as far as going back for more, they agree. And the third type, which is what Rabbi Yehuda called chayva and what the Rabbanan called mitzvah, again, it's just semantics, it's just words. Everybody agrees you go back for more for that, and talking about the same actual wars. The Rabbanan call it mitzvah because it's one step up from what they had before, which was rishus. Rabbi Yehuda had to have a different name for it, so he called it chayva just to be one step up from what he considered to be mitzvah, which you did go back for. So, what are these three things? Mitzvah, rishus, and chayva, at least according to Rabbi Yehuda. So everybody agrees rishus is when David HaMelech went to conquer land from Aram to add it on to Eretz Yisrael, he was not commanded to do that. That's called a rishus. That does not count as a mitzvah. You most definitely would be able to go back from the war for that. And Rabbi Yehuda would not even say that there's any tzad that's called Isaac b'mitzvah. Now, their machlokes is about something like to minimize the number of idol worshippers in Eretz Yisrael. That everybody agreed, like we said before, that you would go back from the war for that, for the things that we said. But the machlokes is that called a mitzvah? You could say Isaac b'mitzvah patur a mitzvah or not. Rabbi Yehuda says yes, but say no. And the last one, which is chayva, is like the war which Yeshua led to conquer Eretz Yisrael. That everybody has to fight. Everybody agrees to that, and it's most definitely mitzvah. You could call it Isaac b'mitzvah patur a mitzvah. Okay, this concludes the 8th parak of the Masechta, and now we get to the 9th parak of the Masechta, which begins with the Mishnah discussing the procedure of Egel Arufa. So the Mishnah begins, and it says that when they speak in the procedure of the Egel Arufa, they have to speak in Lashon HaKodesh, and that's why this is here, because we've been working through a list of things that have to be done in Lashon HaKodesh specifically. So this Mishnah says, what's the source? It says, because the pasuk says, Ki yimatzi chol ba'adama, when you find a corpse on the ground, and the elders and the judges should go out. The Gemara explains there's nothing really from here. You have to add words into the Mishnah. We'll see when we get into the Mishnah, into the Gemara, what exactly the limit is. But here, this is really beginning to describe the procedure. So the judges go out. So who goes? So the Gemara says you take from the Beis and the Gadol in Yerushalayim, and you have to have, according to the Tanakh, 3. Because that's the minimum. According to it has to be 5 because it says Zikenecha, plural is 2. Sheftecha, plural is 2 more. It's a total of 4. A bezin can never be an even number, and therefore it has to be 5. Now, says the Mishnah further, if the corpse was found hidden in a pile, it was found buried in a pile of earth, or if it was found hanging from a tree or floating in the water, then you would not do Egel Arufa, because the Torah says Adama, it says Adama, and this is not on the ground, Adama, and not hidden in a heap. Neufel fell, not swinging from a tree, and Basada, not in the water. Now, if it was found close to the border, or close to a city that was majority Evdei Kechavim, or to a city which doesn't have a Beis Din, they would not do the procedure of Egel Arufa. You only measure to a city that has a Beis Din. All this will be explained in the Gemara further. So the Gemara begins, the Gemara says, what exactly is the drasha? How do you see from the pasuk that the Gemara brings? It has to be said in Hebrew and Lashon HaKodesh. The Gemara says, you don't see it from there. You learn it from where it says, Va'anu va'amru. when they begin to speak, the Torah calls it va'anu va'amru, and in the parsha of the klolos and the brachos and Arkizim and Ha'evil, it says va'anu halavim. Just like we learned that there it has to be lashon kodesh, here also it has to be lashon kodesh. Now the pasuk that the Mishnah is actually bringing is for the next part. And then it says v'seder egla rufa kate. How do you do the egla rufa? So that we call the pasuk yimotzechal badama v'yatzu zikanecha v'sheftecha. 3 from the Beis Gadol went out from Yerushalayim. The Gemara now discusses the machlokes as to how many judges went out to do the procedure. So we're going to Brisa. As we said in the Mishnah, the machlok is between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. According to, it says, V'yatzu zekenecha v'sheftecha. So Rabbi Yehuda says, zekenecha plural is 2, sheftecha plural is another 2. You can't have an even number on a bezin, so you have to add one more. You have a total of 5. Rabbi Shimon says, zekenecha, that's 2. You add 1, and therefore you have to have 3. Now, why? What does he do with the word v'sheftecha? So the Gemara says that's to teach that it has to be the miyuchadim, the unique, the special ones of the elders, and therefore it refers to the judges of the Sanhedrin Hagadol. So Rabbi Yehuda, how does he know that? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says, because why does it say ziknecha? It should just say ziknei. And the fact that it says Ziknecha means your elders, means the leaders of the people, the Sanhedrin. So why doesn't Rav Shimon have that drasha? So Gemara says, no, if it would just say Ziknei, I would think it means the elders from the street. It just means old men. It has to say Ziknecha to show that it has to be Dayanim, judges. Now, if it would just write that, I would think even a small Sanhedrin Ketana, a bezdin anywhere. And therefore it has to add V'sheftecha, and that's what teaches me that it has to be from the Sanhedrin. So the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Yehuda,